One last Big 12 showdown for Utah and UCF. Who comes out on top? We're breaking down this matchup on today's Locked On Utes and Locked On UCF crossover.
You are Locked On Utes, your daily podcast on the Utah Utes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for making Locked On Utes and Locked On UCF your first listen and view of the day. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, available wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube. If it's your first time listening to either of our shows, make sure you like and subscribe. Love interacting with all of you in the YouTube comments, as well as on social media, where you can follow both of us on X. Today's crossover is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. You can visit FanDuel.com today to get started. My name is JT Wistrcill, former intern inside the University of Utah Athletic Department. Excited to be joined by the host of Locked On UCF, Mike G, for this crossover. Mike, I got to be honest, going into the year, I thought this might have Big 12 title game implications, and now here we stand, neither team even going to a bowl game. It's been a wild ride this year.
Yeah, even more comical, JT, is the Big 12 preseason media poll was laughably wrong. It's actually crazy how wrong it was. Look, when you look at the media poll, I want to say they had Utah somewhere near the top of the media rankings. As a matter of fact, Utah was.
Mike, why you got to bring up the media poll? We were picked number one. Why
so quickly you could go from hero to zero in these preseason rankings. It's actually crazy. And then obviously with UCF, they were picked middle of the pack. But for these two schools to be where they're at right now, it's just something I think nobody anticipated. I think the rosters are better than the records. Personally, the rosters are better than the records, and there's still something to play for in these final games. These games still matter to a lot of these kids, and I know we're going to talk about players to watch, JT, but it's those players who these games matter to, and hopefully these coaches coach this like it's their Super Bowl.
Yeah, it's a big game for the players because it's the last one they'll get for a while. Many of their last games in college, as we mentioned, neither of these teams going to a bowl game. But I'm glad you mentioned the coaches because I think that's where you have to start, especially for Utah. I do at this moment. It can still go either way. There is a very strong possibility. This is the last game that Kyle Whittingham coaches at Utah. He had a very interesting quote this week. And he's had a lot of interesting quotes over starting back in the fall and even in the summer before the season really got going about his future. But he recently said, I want to do what's best for this team and program moving forward, not for me. Coming off two disappointing seasons, this one in particular, I mean, to start 4-0, lose your last 7 in a row, maybe even your final one. So it'd be 8 straight losses in a year where you were most people's pick to win the conference. It's been an incredible disappointment. But I do think there's a strong possibility. This is Kyle Whittingham's last game. He's the best coach to ever coach at Utah. For my money, he has been fantastic. He's led this team to 2 Pac-12 titles, a couple Rose Bowl berths. He's led them through several instances of conference realignment as Utah has climbed the ranks and now are in the Big 12. So it is hard. You can't put into perspective what he's done at Utah. He will have a statue. What they've done with Alabama, naming it Saban Field, I could absolutely see that being the case at Utah. So this will be a moment for Utah, the final time Kyle Whittingham potentially coaches in a game. That, to me, is the biggest storyline in this one. Where do you sit with UCF as the biggest storyline for the Knights coming into tonight?
Well, I think it is the decision that I anticipate to go one more year with Gus Malzahn. And you talked about Whittingham. Look, man, being voted first in the preseason poll and finishing 1-7 in conference is potentially 1-8 in conference. That's nasty work, JT. That's dirty work there. However, the perch that UCF was on was not as high as Utah coming into the season, but certainly I think with these two programs, the expectations have risen, right? Like, with both teams in the Big 12, Utah coming from the defunct pack, right? And UCF moving over to the Big 12 a couple of years ago. This is, the expectation is, especially in the era of a 12-team playoff, that these are two teams that should be in the conversation for making the back end of that playoff. And so you mentioned all the things that Kyle Whittingham has accomplished at Utah. Well, yeah, that's great, but coaching is a what have you done for me lately type of business. You're only as good as the last good thing you did. And unfortunately for both of these coaches, they sit at the bottom of the conference, and the last good thing they did was too long ago for fans to be like, hey, this thing is really headed the right direction. One thing you have to remember about the state of the current Big 12 is that if you're standing still, you might as well be moving backwards because everybody else around you is getting better. BYU didn't see it. Arizona State is in the conversation for the college football playoff. And look, man, I like our guy Richie over there, but the worst fan base in the Big 12 probably belongs to Arizona State.
Really?
Yeah, the worst.
Hey, most people say it's Utah, so I'm happy that I don't target on
No. I can live with Utah fans. Arizona State fans, man. Whew, God. And so but you have them in the conversation for the playoff. Why is it a team like Arizona State who, was picked to finish dead last? They were picked to finish dead last in the conference, and look where they're at. Talking about the college football playoff. Colorado suddenly has fallen out of the conversation. BYU still in there. But Iowa State was in prime position for the playoff, and they've kind of fallen down the list. Kansas State had some opportunities in there. These two teams both had opportunities this year to really take their programs to the next level. These coaches didn't do that, and when you don't, accountability is asked for. Now, the buyout, I think, is restrictive for Gus. The buyout here is going to be a problem. UCF fans don't want to hear that, by the way. No one hear anything about the buyout. They're just
no one wants to hear that in the NIL era.
Yeah, they just like, hey, this guy's had enough time. Get him out of here. Get a coach in here who can do the job. But be careful what you ask for. There are not that many elite coaches out there. They're not. But I cover another team, Auburn. Ask them about how many elite coaches are out there after they got rid of Gus. That had a winning season since he left the Plains. So it is tough sledding, I think, down in Orlando right now. But they think that they found something in some players that maybe they can build on. The biggest thing was they missed on KJ Jefferson. And like in today's college football, if you don't have at least two quarterbacks who can get the job done, I think you're playing with fire. And that's where UCF has found themselves this year.
Mike, when you bring up quarterback issues and not having depth, you have no idea how much you're preaching to Utah fans. I mean, now that we are on to technically our fifth string, even though Bottari has looked better than some of the guys in front of him at points, it's just it's been a wild season, and it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out here. One thing before we really quick jump to those keys, wasn't last year at the end of the season, correct me if I'm wrong, Gus Malzahn said that 6-6 was unacceptable last year, right?
He did.
Yeah. And they're on pace to be even worse. So that's what will be interesting. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see where they finish on pace in this final game, how that decision goes. Does Kyle Whittingham decide to step away? It's one of those things we don't know. Is it him retiring, but is it also the athletic department trying to do something? We don't have those answers behind the scene, but there is a lot to play out with each of these teams. But it starts on Friday night, one last game, and that's what we're going to be talking about. The keys to victory for both teams in one moment. But first, today's crossover is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. And that's not all just the NFL, too. Of course, we have NBA, NHL, and if you look watching either of these shows, you love college football. So let's talk about the line in this game. The Knights are favored. The Knights are favored 9.5 in this one. Mike, how are you feeling about this line?
I don't like the way the offense is going right now. I don't feel good about I like UCF to win. I don't know if I like them to cover. Like, I think they have a chance to win. I just don't know if they cover. I think weirdly this could be a weird one. This feels like a one that sets up weird. We're going to talk about players to watch, but again, you've got another starting quarterback, and sometimes when you're making a change like that, it can throw a wrench into some of the plans that you have there. So I would take Utah in the points in this.
And we feel the same way. Only one of Utah's last 5 losses has been decided by more than a touchdown. So I feel like this is a game with the way both these teams have their struggles and issues. I feel like it stays close. But however you guys are feeling about it, make sure you head over to FanDuel Sportsbook today. All right, Mike G and JT Wistrcill on a Locked On Utes and Locked On UCF crossover edition. Time to break down this matchup even more specifically. The biggest stories may be what happens after this game, but it's still an opportunity for each fan base and team to get one last win in a season that didn't quite go their way. So, Mike, let's start with the Knights. What is the biggest thing the Knights need to do to get a win?
Look, man, it's been a kind of a haphazard season for these guys, and right now I think, one of the biggest keys to victory for them is, the passing game. Like, look, if they can't, a 250-yard flourish is not an unreasonable ask, JT. It's not an unreasonable ask. I think that you need a solid game from Dylan Risk. And I think that's why you made this switch, because you weren't getting to that floor with the other two, with Ja'Cory Brown and with KJ Jefferson and then EJ Colston, the true freshman. They gave him a little bit of a shot. They kind of rotated him in one game, but it was pretty clear that he's not ready yet. Right. Number 2, feed RJ Harvey. Right. He is the second best back in the country, JT. And averaging almost 7 yards per carry. This guy is just an absolute beast out there, and you got to feed RJ Harvey. And then you just have to win the turnover battle, dude. How you let a bad team beat you is by turning the ball over. Right now, I'm not sure either one of these teams is good, but the spread's 9.5 for a reason. This is a game that UCF should win. Vegas thinks this is a way you could win, and the reason why I don't like them to cover is potentially because of turnovers.
It's been over 2 months since Utah won a game, so I think it's fair we can say they're not a very good team, even though they've kept it close as a team. It's not like they're Florida State, but Florida State at times has just been getting stomped by some teams and blown out routinely. Utah hasn't always been blown out. Only the Colorado game was a blowout, but even that game in the 4th, Utah turned it over with a chance to cut it to a 1-score game into Buffs territory. So this Utah team competes, but they haven't found ways to win. When you don't find ways to win, that's what we look at the end of the day. So they are objectively a bad team right now. And it is interesting what you talked about with Risk, because I do feel like Utah is going to ask Risk to make tough throws. This is a pretty good Utah front 7. They don't rank highly against the run so far this season, or they're not super high, I should say. They've done some nice things. They still one of the better defenses in the Big 12 overall statistically. They've done some nice things, but they have some key. Last year, a lot of the players on this defense were a top 5 run defense from a season ago. Now, tougher competition, injuries have led to them dropping off that. But they are still a group that's capable of holding equality back in check. Although they didn't the last time they saw one of the Big 12 when they faced off against Gattaboo. That was a struggle for this team. Now they got some players back healthy, so that's where if you're Utah, you're going to try and pack the box. You have some good defensive tackles. Hopefully Utah gets Keanu Tanuvasa back, one of their best defensive tackles on the season who missed last game. If you're Utah, your key is pack the box and ask Risk to make NFL throws routinely.
I agree with that. Load the box to stop and slow RJ Harvey and force him to pass the ball. That's the formula here. And now Risk can do it. He can burn you. Which is why they went to the 4th-string quarterback in midseason. But I'm betting all the marbles on Dylan Risk beating me, and I'm selling out to stop RJ Harvey.
Well, we feel similar way. So let's talk about my keys to the game now as well. I think if you're Utah, you have to win the turnover battle. This was a big problem when Utah had Isaac Wilson under center, who's going to end the season, unfortunately, with more interceptions than touchdowns. And now you get Luke Bottari, who comes in here for Utah. And it was such a weird game last week because he had to come in due to the injury sustained by Wilson on the Gator roll, unfortunately by the Iowa State player. Bottari made some plays. He looked more decisive. He's much more experienced. He's been with this Utah roster forever. So I trust Bottari to take care of the ball. And even though Risk has only thrown one interception, I don't expect Harvey to fumble the ball in this one. I do think there's a chance that Utah could turn over Risk a couple times because this Utah secondary still has some ball hawks in it, and they're capable of making plays in those one-on-one situations. But if you're Utah, you want to let your defense try and win you this game, so you cannot, as an offense, turn it over. Speaking of the run game, RJ Harvey, like you said, he's one of the best backs in college football. Load the box, stop the run. It's paramount to Utah's victory chances that they do not let RJ Harvey be the best player on the field. He is going into this matchup, but if you can try and limit him in this game, that would be big. And last thing I'll say too, I want Utah to establish the run, but their interior offensive line has some injuries and it's just not played well, even the players they have. So I'm concerned about Utah running the ball frequently. So that means I think you got to get Dorian Singer going on the outside. He's Utah's best receiver. He's their leading receiver on the season. Looking at what he's done, 687 yards, only one touchdown on the year for him, which is hard to believe. He's got 50 receptions. He's a guy who had spent time in Arizona, USC. He's a really talented receiver. Bottari knows the system inside and out. It's a little different since Utah had made a change at offensive coordinator with their other OC resigning in the middle of the year. It's been that kind of year for Utah, Mike. But I do think that Utah is going to try to get Singer involved. And if they can do that and take care of the football, stop the run, they might just get one last victory to end the regular season.
Yeah, I agree with your keys there. It's funny how we both had, run game, stop the run, and then turnover battle. Again, when you're a bad football team, you do silly things at times, and at the top of the list is turning the ball over.
Yep.
And that is a way to lose a game that you're supposed to win. Every week felt like a pick 'em for UCF. When we looked at the spread, it was like pick 'em, or it's closer than a lot of people thought it was going to be, and they just have not been able to get over that hump. Now they had the one big game from Dylan Risk, and they went out to Arizona. They had Arizona in Orlando for the space game, and that looked good. But Arizona is a bad team, and they made them look like a bad team. They should have beat Arizona State. They had the game won. Cameron Scatterboo was out, and you had that one. It's just been close but no cigar, I think, for UCF all season. And then if you lose this one, I think you give a lot of fuel to the let's move on from Gus crowd because, they think that the issues are systemic and, that you have better players than your record suggests. Right. And the outcomes have come down, I think, to decisions by the coaching staff. Gus had a Monday a couple weeks ago where he fired his defensive coordinator, named his 4-string quarterback at the starter, and gave up play calling all in the same day.
Wow.
All right. That's the desperation that they feel in Orlando right now, JT, right? Is like, hey, we got to do all these things to try to right the ship. Get Ted Roof out of here. Tim Harris Jr., you're calling plays. Right, Dylan Risk, you're the starting quarterback. Man, the only thing they didn't do was name me to the staff.
You ready?
I think it's a lot of moves of desperation right now. And I like that. I like that they are selling out to try to figure something out too, because one thing when you have a coaching staff on the hot seat, like Whittingham, you have to honor your seniors. Honor the guys who have given you 4 years of their life in this program. Right? Yeah. Honor the guys who have carried you by coaching this thing like you're 10-1 coming into this game. And I'm huge on this because you see a lot of coaches, they're like, oh, the season's shot, let me figure out something for next year. It's like, no. You have a responsibility to the guys who have carried you to win games now, to try to win every game, and not making a bowl game for these two programs. Man, I mean, beside the future of your program where you don't get those extra bowl practices and all the extra benefits that you get from making a bowl game, JT, right? These guys, some of these guys want one more chance to extend their college career. One more game, man. One more chance to go out there and show people, to show scouts, to show, NFL GMs that they can do the job, that they're worth taking a risk on at the next level. right? And, if you're Gus, if you're Kyle, you took that away from these kids, man. They deserve that. They deserve that extra shot, and they're not going to get it with either one of these programs this year. I think that's unfortunate.
It is unfortunate. And you mentioned the seniors that actually carries well for me. I wanted to talk about some of the players to watch. First, for Utah, this is a list of just seniors. You talk about Luke Bottari, talked about it, fifth string quarterback. He's been on this team forever. So he's a veteran. He knows what to do with the ball. Utah won their final game of the regular season with him last year against a Colorado team that was without Shador Sanders. That was a really ugly game. So Bottari, not going to light the world on fire, but he had a couple quality scrambles last week. Utah's run game was so bad, he actually led Utah in rushing on those two key scrambles that he had, one of them going to the end zone. He will take care of the ball and can make a few plays downfield. That's all Bottari is going to be asked to do. We already talked about Dorian Singer a little bit, Utah's elite receiver. And then Mekhi Bernard. He still is one of the better backs in college football to me. I do think he's a top 30 running back this season. Unfortunately, the offensive line has let him down, and there are no running lanes and places to go. So Bernard is still a really tough physical runner for this Utah team. On the season, Bernard, 922 yards, averaging 5 yards per carry. I would love to see him get across the 1,000 threshold. Not going to be easy against the Knights, who I do expect to still, because of Utah's quarterback situation, to pack the box and try and make Utah one-dimensional. But we'll see. That's who Utah's rolling with. And, you're really quick, your point on the senior class. This senior class, a lot of these guys were key contributors in 2021, Pac-12 championship, Rose Bowl berth. 2022, Pac-12 championship, Rose Bowl berth. Has it gone Utah's way the last 2 years? No, but this has been one of the all-time win. Even last year, they were 8-4 still until the bowl game loss. So one of the all-time winningest senior classes that's taken this Utah team to new heights. I'm excited to see those guys get an opportunity to take the field, to honor the legacy and the foundation that they have built. Guys like Junior Tafuna, Van Fillinger, Zamiah Vaughn, who have been essential to Utah's success over the last 2 years. One last opportunity to see them take the field. That's what I'm fired up for. Who are those seniors and players for UCF that you're not just watching and that Utah fans need to know about in this game, but some of those seniors too, you're excited to see one last time?
Look, man, I think it starts with RJ Harvey. You got to send him off with a bang, right? This kid could transfer. He could have done a lot of things. He stuck with UCF, and he is, to me, the second best back in college football. Now, by the numbers, he's fourth in terms of rushing, but it's like 20 yards that separate second from fourth, man. Like there's a group of those guys, and I have a feeling he's going to have a big day, and really solidify his spot in college football history with a big day against Utah on Saturday. After that, listen, man, Jacoby Jones has stepped up at moments here. Now, a lot of people point to Kobe Hudson as the best receiver on the team, but you need a secondary option. You need a guy like Jacoby Jones to have his best game, and then the guy he can't do it on his own because he can't throw himself the ball. And it comes down to Dylan Risk. If you're Risk, you can shape how UCF goes into the offseason, right? Because they spent a bunch of money on RJ on KJ Jefferson, and it has not worked out. And this is I think the perils of NIL, right? It's tempting to go into the portal and spend a bunch of money on a guy that's just transferring into your program. But the truth is, there are only a handful of guys that are transferring out of their situation, not because they didn't lose the job, right? Your Cam Wards, like those guys, right, that transferred and were instant impact guys at their new programs. It's not a ton of them. And so if you're Gus, the one thing you have not done well in your career is you've not developed a quarterback from high school. JT, I don't know if there's a single example of him developing a quarterback from high school,
which is tough.
Yeah, it's really hard now. And Risk that kid, right? Like, is he the first kid that came in under Gus last year as a true freshman, redshirted? Now he's playing in his second year. Could he be that guy? And I think this game is going to be big for him because, again, we've already mentioned these two teams aren't making a bowl game. So what are you playing for? Well, players are playing. If you're coming back next year, you're playing to solidify your spot, right, in the pecking order. And you've got one more audition to do that if you're Dylan Risk. Again, RJ Harvey's out of here, but it's not in question how good he is. For a lot of these kids, it will be about that. So, like I said, I think a lot of eyes are going to be on Dylan Risk. I mean, I put get the 250 yards in the passing game on my keys to victory for a reason. It's because you need Risk to win this one. You do. You need Risk to win this one. And losing your quarterback can really change the trajectory of your season. I gotta say, I went back and watched the Gator roll on Isaac Wilson. JT, it pissed me off.
It made me mad too.
It pissed me off, right?
Really?
Throw that kid out, man. Straight to jail. Yeah, charge him with a felony, man. Like I did not like that. Really made me upset, and you hate it because it looks like he's going to be out at least through the spring now.
They said there's a chance he can come back for spring ball, but they also said further testing. And we've had, Mike, to put it lightly, Utah has had quite the charade with injury reports as they tried to talk about things. So I can't exactly ever trust Kyle Whittingham exactly when he says that stuff, even though I do think he would not say that unless he really meant it. And if Risk can throw for over 250 yards against this Utah defense, Utah's only given up 21 points per game in Big 12 play. They're the fourth best defense in the Big 12, and the gap between them and Iowa State, number one at 19.5, is obviously a very marginal gap. So this is a stingy secondary. They play pretty good coverage. They don't always play the ball well in the air, though. So that's where if Risk can make those high-level throws, it's going to be plays to have for Hudson as well as the guy you talked about in Jones too. So I'm very curious to see what Risk can do here. And that is pretty crazy to think Gus Malzahn has never
There's
developed.
None. No, I mean, think about it. He started, as close as he has come was maybe Bo Nix. A lot of people argue. Yeah, Bo left. Yeah. He played for two coaches at Auburn and then left and found his way at Oregon. But look, Bo's freshman year, Auburn went like 9-4, but his numbers did not look good. So I don't think that Gus can claim development in that situation, right? Yeah, it was tough.
He was not an NFL guy when he left Auburn, and he was when he left
Oregon, yeah. And so it's I don't know, man. It's a very weird situation to be in with a coach of Gus's experience. Because he does know football, but some of these guys like Gus and Hugh Freeze and some of these, I wonder if the game has passed them by.
You mean that a day after when we're recording this, when Mac Brown was just let go by UNC?
I wonder if the game is passing by. Yeah.
When Kyle Whittingham is having his worst seasons, back-to-back rough seasons as an older coach, when Kirk Ferentz and Iowa are nowhere near where they thought they would be, when Mike Gundy hasn't won a single game in Big 12 play.
How about that, huh? How about that?
We're really seeing a change. A couple of these older coaches were able to hold on for a while, but man, is it getting tough.
Oklahoma State was picked to finish third.
Yes, and at least Utah.
They didn't win a conference game.
I know. At least Utah, actually, this is one thing that's funny, Mike, about Utah. They actually beat Baylor, but it counted as a non-conference game in September because the game had been scheduled beforehand. So even Utah in their abysmal season can say, hey, at least we beat Baylor, we beat Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State can't say they beat a single team in the Big 12 after making the conference title game last year and thinking, and Utah thought this too, obviously, in a way, but obviously they thought they were going to run the conference too. So that's where it's just, it's crazy that those two teams and fan bases are in this point, but both sides have an opportunity to end it on a high note with a win. Mike, how do you think this game's going to play out and who ends up out on top?
I've got UCF winning this one. Obviously, Vegas thinks UCF is going to win. I don't think they cover, but I see this one being a touchdown victory, and I see this one 31-24 UCF.
31-24. I like it. Utah should lose this game. It's something. This should be their 8th straight loss, right? You haven't found a way to win a game since September.
Love the optimism, JT.
And this has been such a. Just give me a moment. Stay with me. This has been such a thing for Utah, where it's just like, how can Kyle Whittingham go out like this in his last season? And maybe it doesn't end with a fairy tale. Maybe he does lose his final game, but this is still Kyle Whittingham. He has been such a historic career at Utah. This is his last chance. I feel in my heart, this is probably his last game. This is his last chance to get a win. And Utah is going to come fired up, I think. They're going to come on the road. I think this secondary is a chance to turn over Risk. I think it's the best secondary he's played so far. So I think I could see Risk turning over 1 or 2 times. Utah wins the turnover battle to me. Utah doesn't win this game unless they win the turnover battle. Let's make this clear. Bottari, with the flashes he showed late, can do just enough on offense. This is going to be an ugly game. And I think Utah can muck it up just enough and steal one more on the road for this historic senior class and for their head coach. It's my last chance to pick Utah until 2025. So I'm going to do it. Utah 20-17.
Wow.
They find a way.
All right. That's one man's take. I love it. No way I was picking against UCF in the last game anyway. So I feel you.
Hey, exactly. We got to represent for our teams. However you guys are feeling, your score predictions, whatever it may be, make sure you guys drop them below. Mike, welcome to the network. It's been a lot of fun recording this one with you, and it's going to be a long offseason for both our teams. So make sure you guys stick around for the offseason too. Thanks for stopping by, Mike.
Thanks for having me.
That's going to do it for today's Locked On Utes and Locked On UCF crossover. Both these teams face off on Friday night. Make sure you guys tune in, and we'll have you covered with post-game reactions on Locked On Utes and Locked On UCF.